Hey, look at us go.
What's happening, man?
Oh, just being an absolute technical genius here.
Hey, no worries. A lot of people never use Zoom, and I've been doing it for a lot of hours now, so no worries.
Yeah, no, I've used it, just it's been a while,
Sure,
that kind of thing.
absolutely. And so this is the EricSwahnRacing.com podcast, number 128 with Kevin Raymer, Sasshole on Instagram. So thanks for coming on, talking to me for about an hour or so today.
Yeah, no worries. I'm corrected two times. It's pronounced Romer.
Oh, Raymer,
Everybody
okay.
says it's way more fun to mispronounce it. I get it. Uh, and yeah, total underscore sasshole.
There you go. Got to get
Yeah,
that underscore in there because this somebody probably stole it before you did, right?
honestly, I don't even know. I had a different handle for a while, and then changed to that one. It was kind of on a whim, anyways, and so there was very little intention that went into that. Obviously, it's not a very marketable sort of thing. So, what are you gonna do?
Yeah. And you're good friends or girlfriend with Megan, um, something with a
Zacher.
C. Zacher, that's what it is. Yes, Megan
Yeah,
Zacher.
yeah. We both have. If we're ever out anywhere, the bartender's asking what tab is open. You gotta spell it rather than say it, because if you say it, they're just gonna look at you twice as weird.
For sure. And I think I found out about you at Daytona when I was down there for one of the events.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. We started Arma, main people I race with. Yeah, they started their year down there, and I knew you were around at some other stuff. I think we're at the same places, but we didn't really know each other. But yeah, somehow you linked up with her online, did one of these with her, and now you finally got around to the uglier half of the relationship.
But I love everybody who's involved with motorsports. So I just want to get your story and tell people a little bit about you and what you do.
Yeah. Well, hey, I don't know how this is going to play after what your editing process and your schedule looks like, but recording this just happens to be the day after you dropped an episode with Brendan Posh. So talk about a downgrade in talent. Um,
And not necessarily like I had Dominique Agutter on here, Moto 2,
uh-huh.
Moto GP guy, now, double world champion in World Superbike, Moto E.
Oh
And
yeah,
then
yeah.
I think right after that, I had Billy Ball on. He was like, man, come on, how you have me right on after this guy?
I know,
And
right?
the
Hey,
crazy thing, though, is Billy Balls, I think, has more views than Dominique Agutters, which I don't know how that's possible.
well, I think I'm hoping for a little bit too, where maybe Brandon's going to bring a little more attention to your channel, and then those people that tune in on that are going to check out the next episode, and maybe I'll catch a few momentum views for you.
For sure. And you know what? It's I would love to do all of them be full pro athletes, but like I'm not at that level yet. So I got to fill it in with amateurs and other, other people
Yeah.
in the industry. And like Megan doesn't really ride, but like I wanted to get her story. I'm super into music, so just
Hmm.
wanted to explore all the different options.
Well, I mean, honestly, there's only so many pro athletes within the given industry. So if you're gonna, obviously you're up into 120 some odd, almost 130 episodes, you're gonna have to bring in people that are not necessarily athletes, but maybe are affiliate in some way, shape, or form. Not that I'm not really affiliated on the pro side with anything, but active and that kind of thing at least.
For sure. I just think it's great to network with people, and I've learned so much from doing this, and my life is changing, man. It's for the better, I think. It's when
Yeah.
you sit down and talk to someone for an hour or two, with no distractions, with the phone on, do not disturb, it's like you start to learn things, and I think I'm hopefully getting to be a better communicator and just talking with people and getting their sense of things.
Yeah, I mean, communication as a whole is changing these days as technology and the ways in which people communicate change. So a lot of people, it's very easy to say that things are worse now. Attention spans are shorter, but at the same time, people are maybe able to communicate more as a whole. I don't know. It's easy to be old and curmudgeon and say it's communication is worse. I think it's in a lot of ways different, but being able to have a more long form discussion, whether it's you know via podcast sort of my phone's not necessarily on silent. I am using my phone, so
Yeah.
or if it's with your buddy on the back porch kind of thing, you know having those more yeah, like I say, like long form, whether or not they're deep is neither here nor there. That doesn't necessarily define the quality of a conversation. But yeah, you get at things that you might not necessarily have thought of going into talking to somebody, whether it be somebody that you don't really know all that well, i.e., you and I, or somebody that you've known for years. Yeah.
For sure. And it's like going down those rabbit holes and picking each other's brains. And like TikTok is all about, 10-second videos or whatever. I don't actually use
Mm-hmm.
TikTok, but I'm doing like 60-minute videos. So it's
Right.
definitely the long form discussion. It's not for everybody, I get that, but there are a lot of people who send me messages and comment, and it's cool to see that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I know you're getting into I shouldn't say getting into future tense. If you're 128 some odd episodes or whatever in, you're pretty well established into it. Um, Honestly, like kind of skipping ahead on telling the story of my background a little bit. I come a lot more from a motocross and off-road background than I do from road racing. Obviously, road racing is kind of more what I'm into now, and that's how we have, come across each other's paths. But consuming media from that side, like the main podcast and I guess, yeah, just podcasts and live dirt bike talk radio, as I like to call it, shows I listen to. That guy does a lot of long form interviews with a lot of industry folks, past riders, that kind of stuff. And funny enough, he's based in Vegas, where you're going to soon.
Oh yeah, very cool. So maybe we'll
So,
meet up. Who is that you follow?
PulpMX is the name of basically the media outlet. Steve Mathis is the guy doing it. Was a pro back, like a low level pro back in his day. Kind of gave up on that, became a mechanic, factory mechanic for some years, and then got into being a journalist. And now he's kind of got I don't know about media empire. It's still talking about dirt bike racing,
Yeah.
but pretty big in that industry at least. And kind of got in on the ground, not the ground floor. He wasn't the very first dirt bike podcast, but one of the first. Obviously, there's tons of that stuff now. Um, but at the same time, too, I think there isn't really that, at least not that I'm seeing on the road race side, at least not domestically in the United States. I don't pay as much attention to the international racing stuff, and I'm sure there's probably a lot more modern media following that. But I think as Moto America is relatively new and doesn't quite have the same sway that AMA Superbike had in its heyday, that it's definitely on the rise, but that media following is kind of having to come along with it, and I'm assuming is rising, but there aren't really any heavy players at that yet.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple that I can think of, but no major hundreds of millions of followers type of player in the game. So I wanted to start this for years. It's like I've been racing since 2011, been at the track since 2010, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just like I have this huge network of people that I know, and it seems like it goes to waste if I'm not doing something with it. So just
Yeah,
been
well, I mean,
reaching out to a lot of people, and if I keep doing this once a week for 10 years, think about how much bigger it could be.
right, and you don't know, again, the networking thing. The obviously if you're getting pull enough to where you're talking to international champions, Daytona 200 champions, now who knows who the next guy is going to be.
Yeah.
I honestly, before I got into the road racing stuff, like actual like big bike road racing, I had an interest in it, and did a little bit of the mini moto stuff first. Happened to have a KX100 in the garage. BT45s are pretty cheap. I don't live all that far from the Heron compound. And I had some friends that were doing it at that time too. And I remember the first time I went to the Heron compound a couple of years ago, I pulled in and there was some kid on a KTM 65. Just, he was way faster than I was, way
Yeah.
faster than I still am. Tires more feathered over than I've ever seen a set of tires in my life. And it was some kid by the name of Blake Davis.
Oh yeah, big name. Didn't he just win the was it Super Sport Championship or
No,
Twins?
Twins Cup. Yeah.
Twins.
Yeah. So yeah, that kind of, he won Daytona, and then I think he's young, so had a little bit of a fall off there, kind of found his legs and picked up some steam towards the end of the year. I think the Yamahas, the Aprilias came in and are real fast bike in that class. But I think the Yamahas found a little. I don't know what they found, but they found a little something towards the end of the year, and he was able to kind of capitalize on some other guys' bad luck as he was hitting his stride. So that was cool to see. But yeah, it's just kind of funny. It's like, oh yeah, he was just some kid running circles around me on a bike, half
Yeah.
the size of the little bike that I was riding, and now look at him go.
Yep, you got to start super young. I mean, it helps. You don't have to. I think of guys like Josh Hayes, who I believe didn't really start riding motorcycles till he was about 26 years old. So
Right.
it can be done. It's just maybe a lot harder when you're older in your life to really make it far.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm coming at things as, I got a dirt bike when I was 17. Um, had an interest in it. My dad had raced motocross before I was born. You know, working in the factory, didn't have time to really get to the track after having a kid, kind of thing. So sold the bike, and then he took me to a few motocross races here and there, and I grew up. My folks still living in the same house, only about 10 minutes from Road America.
Okay.
So, been going out there for years, and had an interest in it, but just never had the opportunity to get into it until, I was able to work and save up a little bit of money myself. And then we got dirt bikes and started doing that. And then everything has fallen or come to fruition from there, but I was never really that fast. My dad wasn't an ex-pro. I was, never really dedicating my life to it. It was just something I did. And then, so I even if any success that I've had recently, there's ex-pros that still ride and they're very fast, but I'm kind of like a never was that never quit.
Yeah. Keep going. There's so many different levels that you can be at. You can be just a street rider. You can be a track day winner. You can be, a novice racer, amateur, expert racer, professional, and everybody has their own goals. There's very few people who can make a living at racing professionally in this country. And so
Yeah.
it's just about having fun, and it's a really fun hobby. It just happens to be expensive.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, Bridgestone came on as a series sponsor for Arma, starting last year, I want to say. And so switching to Bridgestone is just so I can get a little contingency. Honestly, that's the first time I've ever gotten any sort of financial kickback from any of the racing that I've done. Yeah, everything else has always just been money out. It's funny when you talk to people, like the neighbor guy saw I had a dirt bike when I moved in and asked if I raced at the Atlanta Supercross, because that was the only dirt bike race that he knew of happening. He's like, oh, he's got a dirt bike, you must do that. I'm like, no, way different end of the spectrum.
And I come from doing like Arma and CCS and Moto Series, and Arma is such a different class than the Wera CCS crowd. It's typically older people, older bikes.
Yep.
They want to all make it home on Monday so they can go back to work.
Those ones that aren't retired yet, at least.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of retirees. And I've corner marshaled, like I said, at Daytona for Arma. I did the flat track and the road racing side of things with the infield, and they don't crash as well. They when they hit the ground, they stick, and they tend to fall asleep on the side of the track a lot more often, it seems like.
Yeah, I definitely had video of one of the guys in the International Horseshoe on a Triumph go down like a sack of potatoes this year.
Oh yeah.
Unfortunately, and he was a doctor too or something, I think.
Oh man.
And, yeah, he rung his bell pretty good. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe they don't crash as often or spectacularly bike wise, but just body wise, don't necessarily bend or flop as well as some of the more younger nubile riders in your more modern series. But I mean, there's something to be said for people still getting out there and doing it. And if there isn't really a place for, you can go to a track day and go ride, and that's fine. But to still at least, take a green flag, race whatever many laps as hard as you can, and take a checkered flag, there's still at least, it's great that there's a place to be able to do that kind of almost not with whatever bike, but almost with whatever bike at whatever age or skill level you are. If you're willing to do it and pay the money, they're willing to find a place for you to race.
Yeah, and they even have modern classes. Like Josh Herring was testing his Ducati there
Yep.
that weekend, and I know there was an e-bike that I think that was the first time I ever was a track marshal where there was an e-bike on track, and they
Yeah.
were really careful. Well, they were saying, do not touch the bike, don't look at it. If it crashes, don't go near it, don't even think
Interesting.
about it, because um, you can get shocked and die if you pick up that bike or touch the bike wrong, and you don't have the proper PPE, the rubber gloves or the leather gloves. and
Interesting.
and so I worked the Formula One event at Miami, and those cars are all hybrid, machines with
Mhm.
huge battery packs. So it's very similar to the Moto E and electric bikes. And so they had like a comfort glove underneath the glove, the rubber glove, electrical
Mhm.
glove, and then they had the leather glove to protect the rubber glove on top of that. So you're standing in this, big orange jumpsuit, and you got three gloves on, and you're in Miami, and it's 100 degrees out. I'm like, this is kind of nuts.
This is progress.
I mean, yeah, it's all,
It-
I understand it, but like,
oh yeah.
can't we make some better heat ventilation or like cooling?
Yeah, I think it's if everything's going right, there's no need for any of that. My intuition is not really having a background in that industry at all, but at least having I am an engineer by trade,
Okay.
so at least having some of a mindset of I would think that that's probably because in the event of an accident, you don't know what may have broken and what is in contact with things it isn't meant to be in contact with. And so that's preparing for a worst case scenario because, especially in a crash situation, if you need to remove something, that's, worst case on a live track, that could possibly injure somebody else worse. You're not going to take the time to or be able to test if there's live current going through something. You're going to react the way we all react when, you know, it's funny. I've done a little bit of flagging, or even just like when you're at the practice track on like a motocross thing. It the if you have a rider down and a bike down, like the the reaction is to go to the bike.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what they train you on a professional level, but I've just done that myself and gone, well, wait, why did I just do that?
Well, the
You know?
thing is, like, you can't actually do much for the rider because, like, I'm not EMT or EMS. Like, I have some medical training, but I'm
Uh,
not certified. I was only certified as a CNA, but the whole point is clear the bike. And if the bike is clear, and the rider happens to get up, we can continue. If the rider
mhm.
stays down, it doesn't matter what happens with the bike. We have to stop the
Right,
race or the session anyways. So
right.
we just do what we can, and usually the riders get up and maybe stumble away or might need some assistance. But yeah,
The
you
rider is
can't.
at least capable of getting up. The bike is not.
Right, yeah, the bike is going to be laying there, and it's going to be red flag if you don't move the bike. So
Right.
you got to move that, get it off the racing surface. But even at any organization, I sometimes see other marshals will run to the bike and will pick up the bike and then completely turn their back to the track. Like, what are you doing? Like, that is not okay. Like, you have to be turning your head and looking behind you the whole
Oh
time,
yeah.
looking at bikes coming at you or cars if you're at a car event.
Right.
But yeah, it happens all the time. And then something that's a big pet peeve of mine now that I've been watching for it is most riders don't look back after they crash either. And yes, they might have some gear on, but you
Mhm.
still don't want to get hit with a rolling 400-pound motorcycle.
I'm sure that's it's an instinct thing, and have at least as a rider, having less instinct when you do crash maybe just means that you haven't crashed as much, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah, they don't know
Um,
exactly what to do in that situation, which maybe it's the first crash, but I
yeah.
think it should be like taught, like how to crash, what to do after a crash. And yeah, they say it like briefly for 5 seconds at a writers meeting, but
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to think rationally while you're panicking.
yeah, or in pain, or like they're sulking away, or they're pounding their fists on the in the gravel trap. I'm like, this is not what you should be doing right now. Like, look up
Right.
track. There could be oil on track. There could be another person barreling into you. Just be aware of your surroundings.
I think also, I mean, from the Marshall side, you're normally looking down track to see what's, or at least either at the stand or past the stand, and then if you do have to go um, give aid or move something, then you have to flip the switch, which might. I assume you, as an experienced marshal, it's easy for you to do, and you do without thinking. But for somebody who has less experience, if you've been in a mindset for a day and a half, then all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, you got to literally go 180 to that while doing a job that you haven't yet done.
Yeah,
that's a lot to do, you know.
for sure. I think every racer should have to do some marshaling. They don't have to do like 20 events of it, but like do 1 or 2 events as a marshal, and you're giving back to the community, first of all. But second of all, I think you learn a lot. You learn a lot about what's going on, like what happens with race control, what happens on the radio, um, and just you hear a lot of facts from the track. You hear like, oh, rider number 42 has cut the blend line again, or oh, number 64 is off the track again in turn 3. Like you hear all these different things that you would never hear normally. And
sorry.
no, yeah, I just think it's great to be on that side of things.
I think yes, I 100% agree. And being a racer will make marshals better marshals, and experiencing marshaling will make racers maybe not better racers, but at least much more understanding and considerate.
Yeah, well, even I would say that like there's so many times where you see like the faster riders at the front of the pack taking completely different lines and getting on the throttle different places and braking at different places than the guys at the back of the pack. It's so obvious to see. And it's like I watch for that a lot. And I'm like, well, I know the line through this corner because I just saw Jake Gagne go through the same exact point 45 times. And the back markers are not using that line at all. So you do learn, and it depends, what bike they're on, and the different classes they have slightly different lines. But it's just eye opening to see that the fastest guys are just doing something completely different.
Well, especially too, like when you're marshaling, you are focusing on one corner for a day, and you see literally thousands of lines through that individually. So when you're, I guess, kind of getting back to like the TikTok thing and the 10-second clips, and everything's changing, and there's even to satisfy the algorithm, you got to put cuts in a video where you normally wouldn't be putting cuts in, you just be talking.
Yeah,
but putting those fast cuts in gets views and gets attention. But in a situation like that where you have one thing to focus on, and you're there to do a job, but you have the ability to study, because there's so many distractions are taken away, and you have this control, but the only variable is the lines and the breaking point and the on throttle point. And it's way easier to notice those subtleties. But especially too, being a racer, having a racing background, or at least a coaching background like you do too, you're more in tune with understanding those things than, a marshal who is just, they're there because they like racing. Otherwise they wouldn't be inclined to do it at all, but they don't have the experience to notice those nuances and things.
Yeah. And I've met some people who are trying to do this full time and who work for specific racetracks and kind of only work at those tracks or in the surrounding area. And they're like, I don't want to have an office job. I want to be outside and listening to motorcycles, and they don't even necessarily ride. They're just like, this is a really cool thing to do. And so I invite anybody, if you have any interest in bikes, if you're still listening now, contact your local racetrack, contact your local racing organization. Like, it's not a super exclusive thing. They're always looking for marshals. I've been at certain events where they had 7 marshals for the entire racetrack. And at a MotoGP event, we have like 500. So there's a lot of gaps there.
And I know I've been lucky enough to go to the Isle of Man one time, and I know that's very much a thing that they open up volunteers to marshal, because they, for a 37 and some change mile course, they need a lot of marshals.
Hundreds, yeah, I would assume, maybe thousands.
I'm sure. They have thousands of corners, and if you're going to have 2 or 3 marshals at each post, that's a lot, and especially for a 2-week race. I don't think it's a commitment of the whole week or whole fortnight, of the practice and qualifying and the race week, but they have few day blocks to take people that will volunteer as marshals. And I don't know what the qualifications for that are, but I maybe this is something you can answer for me, because I feel like it's a thing I read or heard years ago, but at least like SCCA, there's kind of a marshaling culture. There was kind of a clique of people that were proud to be marshals, and that's what they did. They weren't race car drivers, they weren't race owners, but it was like, they were the marshals. They hung out with the marshals. Marshaling is what they looked forward to doing. And but I think that that group was getting older, and they weren't attracting as many new faces as they were retiring old ones, and so it was becoming kind of a thing of like, is this marshaling culture dying out? Well,
Yeah, there's a big culture of people who do that, who might, like I said, who might not even ride or race, or maybe they did at one point. But you tend to see a lot of the same faces at events around the country. It's really cool to see. It's like we're all kind of had the same idea, like this is such a cool thing. I just want to be a part of it and help out. At some of the bigger events, it's kind of counterintuitive, like Formula One, IndyCar, MotoGP do not pay, but Moto America, WERA, CCS, ARMA, AMA, District 14, and a couple others, they do pay. So you can do this and at least get your expenses covered. You're not going to be walking away with tons of money, but it's kind of a wash depending on where you go. If it's in my home state, I can make some money. If it's in Florida and I'm in Michigan, it's going to be probably a wash. I might break even or something like that.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's an older group of people. I'm usually one of the younger people there, and it all depends on the organization. Like I said, some people do go from event to event, but there's always new faces, and you always get to meet new people. I've had a couple marshals on here already, and it's cool to get their perspective on things. And actually, you said you raced for ARMA. I've had Arthur Cowitz on here, who's the chairman of the board for ARMA. So it's cool to talk to race organizers and people in that capacity too.
Oh yeah, I think he's not the chairman anymore. He stepped down from that. He's the treasurer. He's still on the he's still a board member though, but different role now. But that changes actively. Be interesting to see how it changes for next year too. I think there might be some changes afoot. We just had trustee elections, and I know there's a lot of chatter on the internet, but there's also a lot of people who also just like to hear themselves talk on the internet too. So we'll see how it all shakes out. I'm going racing either way. I don't really care.
Hell yeah.
But,
so tell me about...
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just tell me about your ARMA experience and what you've done there.
Well, the one thing I was gonna say real quick was, Arthur was one of the instructors in the new rider school when I took it back in 2018. But yeah, I basically stepping back from that a little bit even more to just kind of fill the gap from where I mentioned about the dirt bike stuff. Started racing motocross, local district level. Got up to being a decent B rider in Wisconsin, which is not a very fast region. Graduated college, moved to Georgia for a job. I dropped back down to the C class in Georgia and still went backwards in my average finishing position because everybody's just way faster down here.
Is that like a novice, intermediate, advanced type of thing?
Yeah. And so in Georgia, at least too, they would have a D or a beginner class under the novice class, whereas in Wisconsin, there isn't anything under the novice class. If first race, you're going to the novice class. At least in Georgia, there is a class under it. And then being closer to where the national championships are held and having like training facilities and kids that are actively trying to make a go at being the best rider they can be, getting homeschooled and all that kind of stuff. There's incentive to kind of stay down in the level until you're able to dominate it and move up to the next. So C class ends up getting pretty stacked.
Yeah. Get some sandbaggers.
Sandbaggers, yeah. I've been to a race where there was no A riders, a handful of B riders, and 2 dozen C riders.
Right. Yeah.
But so the tracks down here, motocross wise, are so much better than the tracks up in Wisconsin. There's great tracks up there, but they're just not prepped very well. Or like if you're going to ride a well prepped track, you got to go to the race weekend, and that's great. But like there aren't like really nice private tracks to go to or do for open riding on the weekend. Whereas down here, there's a lot of good tracks and a lot of them open every weekend. Where that cuts in though is there's not as big a turnouts down here as what I was used to up there. Either people just don't go to local races because they're trained for the big national races, or, well, why would I pay like 3 times the money to go ride half as much versus I can just go pay 20 $25, ride a great track to my heart's content,
Sure.
And so, started riding more off-road. Had done hare scramble stuff, never really enduro. GNCC, Grand National Cross Country Series, is very much East Coast based and a lot of Southeast based. So I did a few of those. I chased that 1 year, tried my damnedest to win a national championship at that. Came up about 2 miles short at the last race of the year. That was a bummer. But from getting bumped from the plus 30B class to the A class there, so like I said, being a never was and never quit, I really didn't have anything in the actual plus 30A class. So I did a few races there, but that was about as far as I was really going to get with that without, a real big effort. Just in equipment and training and, going to a level, trying to take my skills to a level that I'd never was well beyond anything I'd ever dreamed of when I started. And this was at the age of like 34.
Right. Yeah.
So kind of like, for what?
Yeah.
And so around that time, the opportunity to try road racing, which is something I'd always wanted to do, came up. My dad still had his CR 500 that he had bought to race motocross with. And then when I moved away and he wasn't racing motocross with it anymore, he put extensions on it and did more hill climbs with it. And then the thing with hill climb is you don't really get a lot of riding time.
Pretty quick.
You get no practice, you get 2 runs and you're done for the day. So he was getting tired of not really riding the bike very much. And Road America started allowing or doing basically like every Wednesday afternoon would be open practice on the Motoplex. So nice. Supermoto bikes. So he was like, well, if I buy a set of Supermoto wheels, I'll get way more use out of this thing. So we went ahead and did that. And then about that time is when ARMA changed the rules on their motard class to allow unlimited displacement 2-strokes. Since he had always wanted to go around the big track at Road America, not on a parade lap on a street bike, but actually racing. He saw the opportunity to do that. He took the ARMA rider school there, enjoyed it. And he had always wanted to build a sidecar. So that next winter, he started building a sidecar. And I was looking for some kind of a new challenge because, like I said, I got about as far with the dirt bike stuff as I was going to get. And I'd always had an interest in road racing. But even just like to do a track day without, I didn't have a sport bike, didn't have leathers, even just the startup cost of trying it, even if you do a rental program of leathers and that kind of stuff or borrow a buddy's bike, you're still out, several hundreds of dollars.
Oh, for sure.
For the day. And, as somebody who was, either in high school or college, for most of this duration, that wasn't going to happen. So, maybe at that point I'd had the means that I could maybe borrow or something, but it was just, the level of effort for like okay, I'm going to do this once and then what am I going to do? Never quite got around to it. But at that point, like I said, I managed to dabble in the mini moto stuff a little bit. I'd come into a set of leathers for $0. So I had the stuff and I had street bikes. I was, I was a street bike rider since, I was 19 in 2004. And the funny thing was, when I thought I was going to get into ARMA, maybe get like an FZR 600, something a little bit older, but like still kind of modernish sport bike. And I realized, wait, they don't have a class for that actually. They do now, but at the time they didn't. But what they did have was a class called Vintage Superbike Middleweight, which allowed basically inline fours up to 1982 to be up to 685 cc's. Well, it turns out I happen to have a 1982 Honda CB650,
perfect,
which was actually my first street bike. I bought it from a buddy of my dad's when I was 19, when I was in college, for $450.
Damn.
Had a Windjammer fairing on it. I rode it all through college, put tens of thousands of miles on it, going up and down I-43 between Sheboygan Falls and Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And just never got rid of it. I got in other street bikes. I was kind of riding other stuff more, riding the dirt bikes more. And just I thought I was gonna, you know, freshen it up, sell it, use that money to get something I could go race. And then I realized, oh wait, there's a class to actually race a bike I already have. So the focus got turned into, prepping it to get it on track. And obviously, what it is now is nothing close to what it was then.
Yeah.
It's as I've evolved as a racer and learning to road race and that kind of stuff. The bike is involved kind of in step with me too, so that's great. But yeah, I think 20. So Chase GNCC is 2017. 2018. Saw the opportunity to get started with ARMA. Fortunately, or just by kind of happenstance, where I live, which is just south of Atlanta, ARMA is the road race schedule is actually pretty well suited to where I live. I effectively have 4 home races, or I would say 4 rounds that are within 4 hours of my house. I can get home on Sunday evening and get to bed at a reasonable hour and still get to work on Monday morning without having to take vacation day to travel.
Yeah, that definitely helps.
Yeah. So for a series that counts, they count your 10 best races. Saturday and Sunday are individual rounds. So that's 5 weekends basically, if you're not going to do any extras for drops or buffers or anything like that. So really I only have to get a full season of points. I only really have to travel like once per year. I usually do a little more than that, but it kind of works out really well that way, just by complete random happenstance. So they start their year actually in Georgia, but I went to the first race over in South Carolina. The bike, took the new rider school. If you're not an experienced racer with another organization or have some other accreditation, you're just Joe Schmo with a motorcycle and do you want to go racing? They do Friday's practice day. They have a rider school on Friday. You go to the school, you do kind of structured practice with the school, and then you get to race Saturday, race Sunday, wearing the vest on a probationary measure,
Get your race license.
Yeah, get you a race license, and then you kind of go from there. My road racing background is really pretty limited because I've never owned a proper sport bike of my own. I've, barely ridden, a buddy 600 or borrowed an R1 for a little bit, or a guy let me race his RC 390 at Topeka last year, which was interesting because
KTM.
Yeah, KTM. Having never ridden it before. So a lot of my experience on road racing is on a bike that is not actually meant for road racing, which how much that limits or has affected my ability or skill set as a rider, that I don't know, entirely remains to be seen. But it's been a fun evolution because also then too, aftermarket for this bike. There's performance aftermarket for similar bikes like the 550 or the 750, but a lot of those parts don't directly fit onto a 650. And finding ways to either make those parts work or make parts that were meant for some other bike work on this bike, and build it while also at the same time evolve and better tune the bike with it.
Sure. And I bet that you don't start at modifying everything on the bike. You might start with just new tires this weekend, and then next time maybe you broke a foot peg, so you replace the rear set, and then then you go to clip-ons, then you got like steering stabilizer, and you just progressively build. It's not like all in one go.
Oh yeah, I mean just kind of on those lines, yeah. The going from trying to buy good tires for the stock wheels, then converting it to 17s so I could put good race rubber on it was a huge thing. Actually, the worst crash I've had on it was both of my broken foot peg things were at Kershaw, South Carolina. But yeah, first one was actually my worst crash on it. I did lose it in somebody else's oil. I managed to stab myself with my own motorcycle.
Oh no!
Yeah, when I slipped off the low side, the foot peg found the stretchy panel on the inside back of my thigh. The part that isn't going to go sliding down the track if you're actually laying down.
Right.
So my non-folding foot peg found that, and that was a good number of stitches at the Camden, South Carolina hospital.
Imagine if that was your if they allowed kickstands. Imagine how bad that would be.
Oh yeah, that would have been way worse. Well, I mean, even at that time, like I still had obviously I didn't have the kickstand. but I was actually using the kicks. I had the kickstand mount was still on the frame, and that was actually part of my mounting bracket for my oil pan.
Okay.
Because again, then too, with the way the exhaust was laid out and the way the frame tubes were, there was no place to mount a belly pan. So I had to make something and figure out places to mount it. I actually, my lower engine mount bolt is still actually drilled and tapped for the old oil pan, because that was the other mount, and then the kickstand mount here was the other mount. That's what I came up with at the time. And then I ended up, so I was like, okay, we're not gonna do that again. I put folding foot pegs on, but I had just like stock replacement cheap aluminum folding foot pegs, and then actually in Kershaw, while leading coming out of turn 3, my left side foot peg just broke off.
Oh no.
And so now I got real nice, cool billet adjustable ones, But again, those like it's like you're saying, like it's constantly finding the weak link in things that pushes the progression, which is fun. I didn't actually have a steering stabilizer on until this year. Whether or not it was me getting faster or just this year we were able to run slicks. Previous we would have to run DOTs, which obviously modern DOTs have a performance that are beyond really what I could probably push with my skill level on a 40-year-old motorcycle. But still, hey, if you can run slicks, why not run slicks? The rear is lighter, so hey, less rotating mass. Cool
It'll
stuff.
give you a little bit more grip, and I think a reason that they're starting to allow that is that the cost has come down so much. It's not as expensive as it used to be.
Right. I think the thing I have when going to the slicks, I had to constantly remind myself there's always more.
Yeah.
I've not found the limit yet. I still got chicken strips, but there's also some. I got an oversized rear. Like the only way I'm going to get rid of the rear chicken strip on a 4.5-inch rear rim, which is the limit of width that we can run, is if the handlebar's on the ground. So, because also we can't run clip-ons. We have to run like conventional mount handlebars unless the bike came with it. So like that's the weird thing with ARRMA. There's 55, I think, classes between the sidecar classes and all the bike classes. And like you mentioned earlier, with the fact that they do have modern classes, there is electric stuff. Now, if you just have 2020, 22 Gixxer 1000, there isn't a class for you. The rule packages for some of the classes are very friendly to the Ducatis. Basically, they're like Sound of Thunder 1. Is it a twin? Okay, cool, you can run it.
All right.
or Battle of the Twins is like, air cooled twin, you can run it.
Yeah.
And then there's sub ones under that for displacement limits and that kind of thing. And some of the smaller bikes is a class that was kind of built towards the RC 390s, the Ninja 400, I want to say, and the R3. There might be a cutoff.
Lightweight.
It's Sound of Thunder 4, which of course those bikes aren't terribly thunderous, but hey, it was the rule package that kind of fit that type of bike the best. And I think there was a lot of guys that were bringing out the and guys and girls. There's a number of women doing it, running the RC 390 in the Sound of Thunder 3 class, which allows a full on RS 125 GP bike.
Yeah, pretty cool to see that.
Pretty cool to see that, but that KTM, even though it fits that class, they're very much also ran. So those folks, a friend of mine by the name of Eric Watts, he was a guy out of Florida. He actually formerly out of Florida. He's a Georgia guy now. He was kind of keeping like an unofficial point series within that class for just the people on those bikes.
Yeah, and
they got enough of them and proposed the rule package that they added a Sound of Thunder 4 class that was basically new for this year on a provisional basis. Nice. The nuanced thing is that the acronym ARRMA, American Historic Motorcycle Racing Association, it's historic. The H is historic, which doesn't necessarily mean old. So even though it is a vintage roots organization, that's the funny little caveat where they can justify allowing modern stuff, even though it's a vintage organization. Also, too, that club, I want to say, started in either the late 80s or early 90s. So at the time, this bike was only 10 years old.
Yeah.
Which Okay, yeah. So that'd be like somebody racing, yeah, a 2012 uh, GSXR or R1 or whatever.
That's
You know,
newer than my race bike.
exactly. So old, vintage or old is going to be, as time goes into the future, is going to be a moving target.
Right.
They're still going to have classes for. I mean, they have a class for hand shifters or hand shift bikes. They have, just a pre 1940s, the pre 1940 foot
Pre-war.
shift and hand shift. And I mean, to see Alex McLean, lap little tally in the low 110s on a 1938 Norton with no rear suspension.
It's amazing.
Like, if you go to a just like your sport bike track day, like he's in the middle of the intermediate
Yeah.
in lap time on a bike that's almost 90 years old.
And that just shows you like what the level really is and how far you can push these machines, even with nearly a century old motorcycle.
Yeah, I mean the hand shift guys. I think they're all on drum brakes. I think their engine brake, a hand shift Harley or a hand shift Indian, their engine braking is almost as strong as their actual brakes.
Yeah. Do you think
So
they do brake disc conversions on those, or they keep it the drums?
they do the drums on those. Different classes and for different eras with different year cutoffs will have different rules as far as allowing drum brakes or disc brakes or how many disc brakes or even to have floating or non-floating. That kind of stuff. Like for my class here, year cutoff 82, I'm limited. I can only run two piston calipers.
Okay.
I can't run a four piston caliper off of something newer.
Sure.
But like that's the only real limit to the brake. So I can run. I have steel braided lines. I have a modern radial master cylinder, but I have. They're actually SV650 brake calipers, mostly just because they're cheap and I know I can get good pads for them because so many guys track and club race those things that you can get good pads for them versus name another two piston caliper I can get race pads for. I don't know.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, what kind of brake pads do you run?
I'm running. Oh, I got the. I'm trying to see my spare set on the wall over there. The EBC, double H centered.
Okay.
Whatever the expensive ones that EBC makes are, because those are the ones I can get at dealer cost.
Yeah. I just was wondering because like, do they even make pads for these bikes anymore? And like, if you're on a pre-war bike, like, do you have to use white wall tires? Like, you just don't
Something.
know.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's like a more period. AP Lockheed calipers are a twin piston caliper that a lot of guys use, but they were like period correct race calipers. The pads that they have are the pads that they have. They don't. There's not six different pad companies competing with different pads for street use or hot street use and track use or race use. Like there is going to be with a modern equivalent pad.
Yeah. And less compounds available.
Right. Yeah. What you get is what you get. I know those things work pretty well. There's plenty of guys that use them. But yeah, there's just different limits depending on like the year cutoff. A lot of stuff will cut off at like 1972 for a lot of classes. Now they will allow, how's it worded? Or like design is a well used word in the rule book. So basically that means something like, say, a Yamaha XS650, which was made beginning in 1969, but that motor and transmission was basically unchanged in bikes that were released all the way up until like the 1983 or 84 model year.
Okay.
So like my dad's sidecar is an XS650 based motor and it's rule off of 92, but I think his motor's out of like a 78 bike or whatever, and the transmission's from a 76 or something like that. He knows a guy that literally has shipping containers full of XS650 stuff. So like that's his, when he needs parts, he just goes and sees Dave.
Right.
That's his honey hole for getting those stuff. But Dave's also a real good guy to know. He knows how to make. He's one of those old guys that you don't know. You have no idea how much that guy knows how to do. Like a Burt Monroe type, like world's fastest Indian. Just
Yeah.
He's done it all. He has built bikes that have current speed records at Bonneville too.
That's awesome.
But just Yeah, and the stories that you get, like, you mentioned Arthur Cowitz earlier, that guy, him being, he was just kind of an older guy around, and he was friendly because he was, an instructor in the race school and whatnot. And, he was kind of friendly towards me just because, I'm racing vintage superbike. Well, he was racing these bikes when they weren't vintage.
Right.
He
Yeah.
still has his KZ 900 that he has from new that he raced at Daytona and like finished top 10 with at Daytona, you know? So the people like that being around, yeah, there's any number of stories of people that I've met through the ARMA paddock, guys that have raced, Trip Nobles was a top level road racer in the late 90s, early 2000s before he went drag racing. And he's just a guy that I've met racing now. Like, second time I met him, I'd forgotten what his name was, or I was just, maybe he never told me his name, and I was just trying to play it off like, it's terrible with names. I was like, you got to tell me your name again. He's like, Trip Nobles. Like, son of a bitch, I know who you are, man. I
Yeah.
used to see you all the time at Road America when I was like 12, and he was racing for Factory Harley.
Oh wow. Yeah. It's a small world.
And now he's a buddy. I have his phone number, So yeah, it's just funny. Small world, who you meet, all that kind of good stuff.
For sure. And everybody wants to help out and give you advice and give you parts and tips and just be there for you.
I mean, I don't really have a lot of road race experience outside of the ARMA paddock. So I can't comment on what it's like at, WERA or CCS, or especially, Moto America. But compared to the GNCC or the local motocross or the Sorks, the local hare scramble series, or any of the dirt bike stuff that I've ever really done, the camaraderie that exists within the ARMA paddock is something that I've never experienced anywhere else. And honestly, that's part of what makes the weekends so much fun, is because you're almost sometimes you're almost looking forward to the hangout and the social experience as much as you are the on track experience. Seeing friends, getting together in somebody's pit around a cooler with a few bottles of whiskey lined up, or maybe somebody's got some food, got the lights on, got a little bit of music going, maybe somebody's got a fire, just hanging out. But they're old bikes. Somebody's always working on something.
Right. Yeah.
At Kershaw this past year, my dad and I were wandering around on Friday night, and there was a guy, and he was struggling. He was working on his bike, and he had taken the rider school that day, but the bike just wasn't fully prepped. I think he wasn't sure like what he all had to do, and he had ended up entering a class with the bike that he really shouldn't have entered. He should have entered a different class, but because the bike is an older bike, but the displacement was too big for the class he really should be in, it's like, man, it's your first race. They'll probably let you slide. You really don't have any business being in this other class.
Right.
But we ended up like talking to him, and it turned out I kind of knew the guy because I have an old BMW as well, and he used to run an old BMW shop. I think I bought like a battery box off of him at the swap meet at ARMA or at Barber, like early 2000s or whatever kind of thing. But, he just needed some tips and advice on like, safety wire this to here. I don't know how I'm going to do this. Okay, well, I'm going to run over. I'm going to check this other guy's bike because I know he's got the same setup on his. I'll see where he drilled or connected that to safety wire it. And, just helped out, just try to, lent him a better light and a stand because he was using he was doing his best, but, just needed a little direction. But like, and now we have friends that, always make a point of stopping by to talk if we either walk past their pit or they walk past ours first. Barber, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, my folks on the sidecar were getting ready to, what it was, I was going to take the sidecar around the paddock road because I had to drop something off with a friend who was in a campground. And I go to get on the bike, and it starts, but it runs like shit. Well, it turns out the carburetor boots had cracked, and the carburetors were sucking in air. Those motors shake violently, and old boots, and they got brittle. Well, so at this point, my folks had maybe 45 minutes before their race was up on that thing, and within 5-10 minutes, they had competitors of theirs around in the pit trying to help. My dad went to ask somebody else who has a bike with that same motor if he had any spare carburetor boots. They ended up not coming up with anything. One of the guys, one of their competitors, another sidecar racer, he had gone to the swap meet, found a guy in the swap meet with a bag of intake boots, just random, for like $10. Just brought back like a gallon Ziploc bag full of intake boots. Like, we can find something in here that will work. Other guy had a Dremel tool. They managed to do the little bit of machining that it took to kind of get things to fit. It didn't fit right. There was a little bit of an air leak. It had a high idle, but they at least got out and they got their race.
Yeah.
It took a village, and mostly of people that, were trying to beat them. But that level of camaraderie, and I think also too, because of it being an organization of older motorcycles, none of these bikes just find their way onto the track. There's tinkering and problem solving and maintenance, and it takes a mindset to work through all the issues that it takes to get one of these bikes on the track and then keep it on the track. And that takes a certain kind of person.
Yeah. And I would say that the ARMA group probably has more mechanical experience than the WERA group, just because you have to be working on your bike all the time to make sure everything is right. Where a modern sport bike, you don't have to really touch it. It's good for miles and, thousands of miles before something goes wrong.
I mean, I've walked through plenty of WERA paddocks, and yeah, I'd be inclined to agree. I mean, obviously there's plenty of people in WERA who are very smart.
Oh, sure.
But there's a lot more people that are really just putting in gas and checking their tire pressure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's plenty of people in ARMA that are doing the same thing. Or there's, they're at least on like an amateurish enough level where, like, I don't know, I checked my tire pressure on Friday, it seems fine.
Yeah.
But they're having to like adjust their points or change jetting or, do all the, something cracked because it vibrated apart, and they have to find somebody who can weld, that kind of stuff.
And to your point about, camaraderie, and your competitors helping you out, I've lent parts to my competitors, and the thing is, you don't want to beat them in the pit lane. You want to beat them on the racetrack. And if they're not out there, it's like one less person to compete with. And it's right. You might like to have the open track and get another position in your pocket, but you really just want to battle with your friends and your people who you don't even know, and you just want to have a good battle out there. And I played a lot of sports through the years, but I don't think, if say you're playing a hockey game and some guy breaks his stick and there's no other sticks on the other team, I've never seen it where, one team lends them another stick or a skate or something like that. It just, it never came up.
Yeah. And so yeah, obviously that's a unique thing to racing, and certain organizations are going to be more one way than another. Obviously, it's something like, especially with Moto America, but even in WERA, there's definitely more. Nobody's really taking a paycheck from WERA weekends, but at least there's more contingency on the line and that kind of stuff. In ARMA, there's some contingency. I think like Vanson pays contingency. I don't really know what their structure is. Bridgestone's like the one I'm more familiar with, just because they're the one I can actually really use. So there's some kickback incentive there, but nobody's taking a profit from an ARMA weekend.
Yeah. And
regardless of how you finish,
right. It's for the love of the sport and just doing it and having fun and beating your own battles and your own demons, so to speak. Now, if you had more money, would you want to get a different bike, or would you stay with the same bike and do more rounds?
So, funny you should ask that. I actually, I've been kind of thinking about that too over the last year or so. So I defended the number one plate again this year. So this will be my third year getting to run the number one, which is great.
Yeah, congratulations.
But, thank you. But am I just going to keep doing the same thing? Am I going to try just be the 800-pound gorilla of the vintage superbike middleweight class? What does that get you? Not much. I still have a carrot to chase in this class. There's a few people that I've never beaten. I haven't, with pandemic stuff and and just like different locations. Paul Germain out of Canada. Before Barber this year, I'd only really raced him heads up one time at Topeka earlier this year, which is a track I'd never been to. And in years past, he's been the guy. He's the man to beat in this class. He has the fastest bike. He's pretty old, but he was, like Canadian national dirt track champion, like was a top road racer in Canada with Yamaha factory level support, or to whatever level they supported Canadian road racing.
Yeah.
He knows how to ride, and
Been doing it a long time.
He's been doing it longer than I've been alive at a very high level.
Yeah.
And so, I got to race with him at Barber, and I was hopeful I could maybe give him a little bit of a challenge, and we battled pretty good, but he let it be known he still had me. He is famous for and people were telling me he's like he only rides as fast as he had to, or he has to, and you could tell he was playing with me a little bit, but I thought we're doing okay, and I thought maybe I had a little something for him, and last lap of the last race on Sunday, he dropped 2 seconds off his lap time. It's like, okay, yeah, you had it all along, didn't you? Now
he's just managing the margins after a certain point.
Yeah. And he was a great guy to hang out with. We weren't pitted too far apart from each other. He gave me his last beer while we were loading up. Just shooting the breeze. He gave me some advice. Said he might let me ride one of his other bikes because he's like, oh, you're pretty good. If you just had a little more horsepower. I'm like, I could use more horsepower, Paul, but I think it's a little more than that.
Yeah.
I appreciate the compliment, but he does have horsepower on me, but that's not the only thing he has on me. Or like earlier this year, I went to Laguna Seca, which was my first time there. Just, not just playing it in Gran Turismo or ride, and going up against Nick Einish.
Okay.
Yeah. So, he was, I'd never been to that track before. He was teaching school there 2 weeks before.
Yeah.
So, and he's on a GPZ 550, used to belong to another guy. That guy unfortunately passed away. He left that bike in care of somebody else, and that guy lets Nick ride it at select races. So he only comes out to a few a year, but obviously he knows Laguna Seca, and that bike is very well sorted. I'd say the bike, like horsepower-wise, is very similar to this. How much weight difference and handling difference is, kind of a wash or whatever. I was very encouraged by the fact that I was only 0.2 off of Nick's best there.
And how old is Nick now?
Oh, I don't even know.
I know I have some books from him that he wrote.
Right. What's funny is that bike has a 6-speed, and he lost 4th gear on Saturday, I want to say. So I thought, okay, maybe I got a little bit of a chance because he's down a gear. Well, I only have a 5-speed, and I lost 3rd gear on Sunday. Yeah. So Sunday's race, we were 1 and 2, but we're both out there circulating, like double shifting through one of our gears.
Right.
Actually, I still got this thing.
That's the gear.
That's the gear. Missing. I didn't when I was trying to set up my studio here. I didn't even intend visual aids, but yeah, I got my teeth that I sheared off at Laguna Seca right here.
Oh no.
Fortunately, they all found their way to the magnetic drain plug and didn't go through anything else.
That's good.
So, sorry, tangent on tangent. Back to your question about racing something else faster. And actually, I had another guy who I know mostly because he races Vintage Superbike middleweight, asked me that question, and I was existential crisising it. Like even at the level that I'm at on this thing, which this bike's good for 130, maybe 125, 130 miles an hour, not that fast. I don't know how much faster do I really want to go. Because as the risk level goes up, is my fun level going to go up at a linear rate with that?
Yeah, but I wouldn't necessarily say that faster is more dangerous. I mean, it sounds like it could be, right? You have a higher chance of risk maybe, but I don't know if a study's been done about that. I know at least for street use, I've seen things that say faster speeds did not mean if they change the speed limit, slower speeds did not mean fewer crashes. So it doesn't necessarily correlate, but yeah, if you're going 212 miles an hour versus 135, big difference.
Yeah, or even just 180 versus 120.
Right.
If you have the same, if you lose it at the 3 board going into the same corner, how bad is it going to be?
Right.
Yeah, and I'd be interested, in that study, is it if the speeds come down, do you not even factoring in like cell phone use or anything, do distraction levels go up? What are the factors that lead, you're not paying as much attention, you're not as focused because it's more, I'm going slower. What do I care?
Yeah,
Well, then you don't pay much attention and then you hit more stuff.
right. It could
Um,
be.
or, I mean, I know a buddy that, he bought an R1 as a street bike just because he was 6 foot tall. He fit the R1 a little better than the 600, but the insurance rates are so much lower on the 1000 than the 600 because more people that are inexperienced buy 600s. They're cheaper. They can get credit on them, but they crash them more often and drive the insurance rates up. So if you look at a study on that, the data would probably say, well, 600s are more dangerous than 1000s.
It's all
Are they?
relative.
Are they really, or is that just the way the data is skewed because of other stuff? That's oh wow. I have so many tangents to get into on data and how you can look at stuff and opinion. Yeah, yeah. Anywho, I'm going. I was supposed to actually go get it last night. I'm actually going to go pick up a CBR 600
Oh,
F2
nice.
Thursday, I think.
What year?
I'm not even sure what year they made those, like 90 through 94 or
Okay.
91 through 94. So that'll be interesting in the sense that, like, so this is vintage superbike middleweight. Year cutoff is 1982. That bike will be next gen superbike middleweight, which, where I said before about the FCR 600, that would be that class didn't exist in 2018. But now they do have a class that allows kind of those early 90s sport bikes. They have next gen superbike, next gen superbike middleweight, and next gen superbike lightweight. So this would be basically a 10-year newer version of this, or this same bike, but or class of machine, but evolved 10 years on. A buddy of mine in Atlanta, his dad used to race it with Weira back in the day, and I don't know if he crashed that bike and hurt himself, but he got hurt, parked the bike. It's been in storage since late 90s, early 2000s or something like that. So he had pulled it out, asked me if I knew anybody that might be interested. And the more I got to thinking about it, I thought, well, heck, I'd be interested. So yeah, I think we worked out a deal. I got some ideas of what I can do with it because, but I need to get my hands on it and see to what level it's already modified and what needs fixing and what can be done. So yeah, I think we're gonna step up to something like that. It's not like buying a Panigale and going and racing Sound of Thunder 1.
Yeah,
but
that's all right.
But those boys can have that. I don't.
Yeah, you're upgrading a decade. I like that it's grouped by era. That's pretty unique.
Yeah, you could bump up to something, maybe they allow bump up classes and whatnot. So there's certain things that can kind of ride into a class with a more modern era. I think that the next gen superbike middleweight, Nick actually won that class on his 1981 actually GPZ 550 at Laguna.
Yeah,
because there's really no provisions in that class for that bike, but it's like, oh well, shoot, you want to ride a 10-year older motorcycle that has like no body work on it?
Go for it.
Yeah, okay, sure, be our guest.
Yeah, you can always race up, but you can't sandbag and race down.
Right, exactly. So yeah, that'll be kind of a new challenge. I don't know if I really, and I kind of struggled like trying to understand if there's any sort of era or class or thing in particular I was kind of drawn to, 70s two strokes or anything like that. I think what's a thing I see kind of regularly, and it goes into like music and that kind of stuff too, is you're always kind of drawn to the era that drew you into something. Like for bands, think of whatever band, your favorite album by that band is probably going to be the first album that you listen to by that band.
Right.
It might not be their best album, but it was the one that drew you in, and you got to know them through that. And usually that kind of stays with. And I've seen it too, where like, I raced this class with this era of motorcycle because it's what I had. But my dad really likes these because when he first went to watch road racing, this is what was modern at the time. And so he's kind of drawn to that. Well, my first time seeing a professional road race or a road race at all, I want to say was 95 or 96 at Road America. So that kind of mid to late 90s sport bike, even though I've never really been a crotch rocket sort of guy, I like dirt bikes and more like cafe racer sort of stuff. This thing was kind of a half-ass street fighter, before it became a race bike. That's kind of still more the era of sport bike that, at least draws my attention, is kind of that era. So this is a little bit before that, but it's at least kind of, what's also fun about it is the architecture is there. It's a dual overhead cam liquid cooled inline four.
Okay.
Which is the same thing that modern bikes are.
Yeah.
The technology and is older, but the architecture is basically has evolved to be what we still have today. But at the same time too, it's old enough. It's old enough to, it's in that window of being too old and not old enough to be cool yet. So the bikes are cheap.
Yeah, well, that's a helpful thing.
Which, I mean, so like when I got this thing, like I said, I bought it for $450. Like, yeah, if you get a running CB whatever, like 70 CB 550 or 750 running, those bikes are $1,000 to $2,000 depending on how nice they are, or even probably beyond that. Just because they had their era of being cool. People bought up all the cheap ones, either ruined them or made them cool, and now you can't touch an RD350, an XS650, a CB750. Shoot, they were getting into doing CX500s or Viragos. Those bikes are absolute turds, but they became cool street bikes for people to have. But nobody's going around buying like 89 Gixxer 1100s or 92 CBR 650s yet.
Right. Now, are you planning on keeping this bike behind you? Are you so you have an A and a B bike, or are you trying to sell this one?
I think I'm going to race both. If that once that thing's prepped, I could realistically run 5 different classes, I think. So this vintage superbike middleweight, my bump class would be vintage superbike heavyweight, which I ran this year because that was the feature class within ARMA. So it was fun to get a little extra notoriety with that. Last year, I actually ran Formula Vintage as my bump class, since vintage superbike heavyweight doesn't have like a higher displacement level thing to bump into. They created Formula Vintage, which is kind of a catch-all for a lot of the vintage classes that, like your Formula 750, your Sportsman 750, your classes that don't have another displacement level to bump to. So there's kind of a grouping bump class for guys that are in those classes that they aren't just stuck running one class a weekend.
I got you. It's like a Formula One type of class. Anything goes.
Yeah, to some degree, obviously. I think they cut off like the vintage superbike rule package is kind of where they cut it off at. But that was one of those ones where I asked if I could bring that out because this bike wasn't listed in the rule package, and the referee at the time was kind of like, well, shoot, yeah. I mean, if you want to bring that out and race it against this or this or this, I mean, whatever, be my guest. Actually did decent. I got second for the year on that thing in Formula Vintage last year. And then so that's 3 classes I can basically race with this bike. Then with the other one, next gen superbike middleweight, like I said, I presume I can bump into next gen superbike with that as well and race against Gixxer 750s and whatever from the early 90s as well. 5 races on a day is going to be a lot.
Yeah, so you're going to be exhausted.
I doubt I'm going to do that very often, if at all, but it is interesting that the potential is there should I so choose.
And I know that the number of laps change per racetrack, but what's a typical sprint race lap count?
So like a shorter track, we're going to do 8. A longer track, we'll do 6. So obviously the time duration depends. Obviously Little Tally, we're going to do 8 all day.
Yeah.
Barber, they do 8. Especially since at Barber we don't have morning practice. Like you do practice on Thursday or Friday, but then Saturday and Sunday are just racing.
Okay.
Most of the rounds, Friday is practice all day, and then Saturday and Sunday there's a morning practice, and then you get into racing. Usually like 2 rounds on Saturday, then lunch, then racing. Sunday, 1 round of practice. They usually try to get the first 3 races in or so before lunch. That way you can just kind of get out of there a little earlier on Sunday.
Sure.
And yeah, that I mean that's like we haven't gone back to Road America in a couple of years, and a lot of guys want to go back there, but having a 4 mile warm up lap and a 4 mile cool down lap really stretches that program even on a 6 lap schedule.
You're doing 2 minute plus two, maybe 2 minute 30-second lap times, right?
Yeah, and that's your race lap time.
Yeah.
So and especially for the guys on the smaller bikes, there's guys on CB 160s out there, and 100cc two strokes, bikes. Their absolute top speed is barely 100 miles an hour, so their cooldown lap is, their race lap is maybe just under 3 minutes. Their cooldown lap is 4 to 5 minutes.
I feel like they're not going there now because it's too hard on the machines.
There's a number of reasons. I think, if we could do a thing where we exit at 5 and then make the hard right to get back into the paddock, that would alleviate the warm up and cool down lap issue to some degree. The problem is they were organizing ARMA weekend with the Rocker Box Vintage Motorcycle Show, so there were spectators all over the place, and especially so they didn't want bikes coming in hot off the track and then riding through spectator area, even if they tried to cordon it off to where there's a lane up the hill into the paddock.
That'd be hard.
But the thing is, and I didn't even really think about this too. They're proposing, or like the guys on some of the smaller bikes, they have to gear so tall for that track that, if their clutch is all the way out in first gear, they're doing 40 miles an hour at idle. And so they're like, if you want us to do safe paddock speeds, I got to slip my clutch up that hill. Are you going to buy me a new clutch at the end of the weekend? Because otherwise I got to do unsafe paddock speeds.
Yeah, I hear that. Or, you gotta push them.
Something, but okay, you got to push them up that hill, or you got to send a flatbed to like ferry $12 at a time.
Crash truck.
Yeah, an extended crash truck,
The whole grid.
Something like that, or they would want to do like an early checker, so that we don't have to do a whole cool down lap. Well, then guys on the faster bikes are worried that if somebody blows the early checker and then butt pack somebody halfway up the straightaway at pit in, if there's an unnatural pit in point, all it takes is one close call there to be really bad.
Sure.
To make that whole thing for the weekend not worth it. So there's valid concerns on either end of trying to shorten up that sort of stuff. But then also too, like Road America, especially since they didn't go there this year, but NASCAR went there. I think that track, their stock has gone up. The profile of events that they've been having has gone up, and so the overhead track fees that ARMA would have to pay to ride there or get a weekend there are a little above what ARMA could really shell out. So there's a number. I think there's a strong want on both sides, but definitely some insurmountables in between that I don't really. There's people that want to solve those issues, but I don't really see easy solutions to a number of things that would bring us back to that track.
Yeah, Road America is like such an iconic track for the States, and they're just upgrading their facility. I think they put in a whole bunch of new TV screens for the fans, so that's kind of cool.
Yep, I think they did a repave too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's my home track. I mean, I used to remember being bored on summer vacation, and I rode my BMX bike out to. If you go out County Trunk J, and you can sit on the edge of the county highway, which is outside of turn 3, and you can watch turn 3 from the road.
Yeah.
And I was, 12 years old. I just had nothing to do. I knew that I think it was Formula USA weekend out there, and I just rode I rode my BMX bike, like 28 miles that day. My butt was really sore, but I watched motorcycles go for a little bit. What was funny though, actually, is, it was on Friday. Both my folks were at work. My dad actually had a ticket for the track that he wasn't using that day, because we're going out Saturday or Sunday to go watch. And I didn't realize there was actually a ticket like at the house I could have got in.
Oh man.
After all that,
if I wanted some of it.
Yeah. But it just, the accessibility to that, actually funny story, how I went there my very first year. My dad at that time was doing sound for bands, and so he had a PA system for that a band that he worked with used. And at that time, you know where the Skip Barber Racing School building is,
Yeah.
and everything outside of Turn 13. That building used to not be there. So back in the era where there was the Billy Mitchell Bridge over Turn 13, that hill behind the Skip Barber Racing School that goes up to the top, and then there's the Lions Club food stand up there. District 16 did hill climb, like motorcycle hill climb up that hill to the top of that road for a couple of years. But because they couldn't to do pit announcements to the hill climb guys who all their paddock was on the outside of the straight between turn 5 and turn 6, they couldn't tap into the greater PA to tell those guys what class was going to the line or anything. So somebody who knew my dad had a PA system asked him to bring his PA system so they could do pit announcements for the hill climb guys.
All right.
Which just ran on Saturday.
Yeah.
Or whatever. So my first memory of going to a road race was going into Road America in passenger of Dad's van, and what if Superbike practice was on. I remember seeing like Pascal Picat on the factory Harley go through in the rain on Saturday morning as then they're getting set up and watching the hill climb stuff. But obviously that stuff kind of all got bulldozed now. They only did that for a few years. Actually, where the go-kart track is, that used to be an off-road track. I've been taken out there to watch motocross racing in the area where that track is now. There used to be a lot more elevation change. They filled in a bunch of stuff. They actually raced off-road trucks out there. I think it was built for trucks, but since Toyota was the big track sponsor and Chevrolet was the series sponsor for the off-road trucks, Chevrolet wanted to cover all the Toyota signs when they came in for their race. And no, we're not going to do that. And now it's a go-kart and supermoto track. So
I gotcha. It's the progression of things over time. Things change.
Well, of course, is it better or worse? I don't know, but it's just interesting how things go.
For sure. And I see you got Torque Center on your chest there, on your hoodie.
Oh, yeah. You know about it, or?
Oh, tell me a little bit about it. Looks like a motorcycle rider and some roosts.
So Torque Center was a apparel. They weren't a motorcycle shop, but they were kind of an everything shop in New Berlin, Wisconsin. They started back in the 70s as like a race support truck, like Street and Competition is at a lot of the regional events in the Southeast. They were the truck and trailer that had parts that showed up at the dirt bike races. And eventually that morphed into a brick and mortar store, and they carried motocross stuff, or motorcycle stuff in general, I should say, but they had snowboard, skateboard, BMX. They had all of that stuff.
Action sports.
And when I was a kid, that was a really cool place to go. I mean, I remember like Dad taking me and a couple other kids who lived down the block who all rode BMX bikes together down there. And I remember like buying my first pair of Fox paw protector gloves, blue, because they were what Doug Henry was wearing in Motocross Action magazine at the time. Did I need gloves to ride my BMX bike around? No. Did I feel really cool that I had them? Yeah.
Good to have gloves, though. I'm a huge advocate for wearing gloves on any two-wheel machine.
Well, there you go. But unfortunately, that place closed. The couple that owned it got older. They retired. They sold it. Just times changed. I think it went out of business late 2000s. And it came back. Somebody bought it and it came back briefly. And Mike, the original owner who started it, he had passed away, but his wife, Gail, started doing a run of some apparel that's kind of in the classic logo from back in the day. Nice. And this was my Christmas present last year was Torque Center hoodie, which I never had one of these back in the day. But it was a really cool kind of memorable thing. Just, Torque Center, to anybody kind of grew up in that Southeast Wisconsin, Northern Illinois area, like that was a pretty big epicenter for a lot of anybody who had any interest in like action sports stuff, especially in the motocross community, because like I said, even when I started racing dirt bikes, like if you broke a lever, you went to see what the torque center trailer had,
Yeah,
you know,
that's really cool.
kind of thing. Yeah.
And so you've been racing for quite a few years now, been at the track in the motorsports community. Do you have any sponsors or anybody helping you out other than like Bridgestone for some tire money?
No, honestly, my sponsor list um, for at Arma, just I think it reads Taco Bell and Maker's Mark, which I really just kind of put there to get a laugh.
Yeah.
um, no, it's all self funded. I'm not, like I said, like my internet handle. I don't really have a presence. I don't have anything I'm generating content wise or product wise that I'm pushing. So I'm not really trying to market myself. Um, so with that comes, I haven't asked, it's all for love of the game. Um, I have had one guy kind of, you know, he was questioning like what I was looking at doing like racing wise, future, and maybe there'd be some opportunity there, but I haven't really pursued it all too much. Um, I will say though, I did mention like I get brake pads at dealer cost. Fortunately, through work, I'm able to have access to some stuff. Nothing for free, but at least I can get dealer cost on some stuff through like power sports distributors, or just like having access to machine capabilities. To modify and make parts for myself. That kind of stuff kind of keeps me going a little bit, but it's nothing's coming in financially. I'm not collecting a stipend from anybody or getting contingency or showing up peddling product. A few things here and there is like friend connections where I've gotten some, like the cylinder board job got done by Millennium Technologies for a deal, but that's because they're from Plymouth, Wisconsin. Like we know people, like between me and my dad, like we know people that work there,
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So,
Just networking connections.
yeah, and like not necessarily trying to pimp anybody for free labor, but hey, if you're gonna just charge me costs or for shipping on it, like great, thanks, really appreciate it.
Well, you're in a whole different class than most motorcycle racers. Like you may think that you're slow, but you're still probably faster than 99% of the all the riders in the world.
That's a weird thing to think too. And that even kind of goes back to like the dirt bike days.
I mean, you got a number one plate on your bike right there. Like that's not you can't just put that on there and go to the racetrack.
No, yeah, and that's yeah. I mean, if you take the total summation of all street riders, but even just like I haven't done like I'll still do a track day every once in a while on this thing. I only live like an hour and 10 minutes from Little Tally, and since Sport Bike Track Time does so many dates there, I believe there's some co-ownership between that organization and that track.
Yep.
The track rates are super cheap compared to what track day rates are most other places. So and especially since, like I say, this thing's been evolved, if I need to test and tune, I need to just try some stuff out because, the next race is going to be a 12-hour drive away. It makes way more sense to go there and do a track day. Well, obviously, I'm in, maybe my rider skill level is expert class, but I'm on a bike that's slower than everything else in the intermediate group.
Yeah.
So I can at least ride to the front of a intermediate group on a bike that's 40 years older than everything else out there.
That's got to be satisfying.
It is fun. It is a little frustrating at times because like you're just getting yarded on the straightaways, and it's like, okay, how do I set myself up to where I can stay with this person so I can get them on the brakes in the two kind of thing. Remember that the last one I got.
Yeah, it forces you to be better on the brakes and corner entry, corner exit, and then just got to hold on the straightaway.
Yeah, just paying attention. I remember I got a little talking to. It's like, well, you're under the 6-foot rule going through one, but you did adjust. I was like, well, yeah, but I was just, I had to like maintain a run going into one if I had hope of like staying with them all the way to 2 to make the pass safely there.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Modify a little bit.
Yeah. No, what's also funny, just about every time I've done a modern track day with this thing, it does smoke a little bit on decel. And
you probably get black flagged or meatballed.
I haven't gotten meatballed, but I have had like like the main guy running like pit in or pit out, just like, hey, everything going okay? Well, the flag guy said you're smoking a little bit. I'm like, oh no, it just does that.
It's
It's
normal.
fine. Don't worry. If it stops smoking, that actually might be more of an issue.
Right, for sure. So that's over an hour and a half already. So I hate to cut you short. I'm sure we could go a little bit longer, but
Hey, no worries, man.
I gotta get some dinner and all that stuff. So I'll be sure to get this edited and posted pretty quickly here, and maybe in the next week or so. And just be sure to share it so it gets as many eyeballs as possible.
Oh, absolutely, will do. Hey, I appreciate you reaching out. And sorry, my schedule got a little weird, but it kind of worked out doing it quicker than later. So,
For sure.
hey, all good.
And I know we mentioned your Instagram, but where can people find you online?
So yeah, my Instagram is total_sasshole. Like a sassy asshole. The amalgamation of those two things. I don't know. Maybe if you've made it this far into the interview, you've picked up on the fact that I can be sassy. And well, we haven't gotten into the other part of thing, but you haven't asked me my opinion on a whole lot of other stuff.
Next time.
That's part two where I just rant a whole lot more. But yeah, that's my main social media. My name's Kevin Rammer, Rammer. I am on Facebook. Don't use that as much. I mean, my content's not all racing related. So if you're gonna see stuff from punk rock shows and just my cat at this point, I have just a dude with a cat. I don't have my dog anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, a lot of racing stuff though too. Be getting this CBR 600 in a few days here, presumably. So some content, well, not curated content, but that'll be coming along if anybody's curious about how that goes, or you're just curious about like what the ARMA weekends look like. I'm not the social media arm of ARMA, but it is a very different look and feel from like what Moto America was. And I know you're talking to Brandon about social media and how that plays into promotion of say the Moto America weekends and whatnot. And I think ARMA still, to his credit, has a very different but also enjoyable vibe as well. So yeah, so a long answer to a short question, but that's generally my specialty. So
Well, very good. Thanks so much again for talking to me, Kevin. And I'll see you at the racetrack.
absolutely, take care.
All right, have a good one.
Goodbye.